Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy. Up first, going to satellite imagery, you can see we've got low pressure here near the Yukon Delta coast. Lots of cold air continues to pour southward here out of the Arctic and across the Russian Far East, picking up moisture out over the warmer water and resulting in snow showers here from actually St. Lawrence Island, the Bering Strait, southward to the Pribilofs. On south, snow showers today over the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, and then scattering out back to the west there and ending at Shemya. As you can see, the cloud shield from the next big storm already reaching the Shemya Attu area, the cirrus shield. The more rain-producing clouds are still farther off the map. Otherwise, up to the north, got a band of clouds lying east to west there, rotating around this huge upper level low pressure area. Actually a little bit warmer air aloft spreading in there, so that's creating a band of snow, mostly off the coast, but catching the eastern Arctic coast. Bear reporting light snow much of the day, and looked like a little bit of clearing up here over the Seward Peninsula, and also Cook Inlet in south central Alaska. There are some areas of clouds and snow showers riding up to the North Gulf Coast during the afternoon hours. Otherwise, for the Panhandle, had some rain, heaviest, a weakening system moving through, represented by this trough here. And most of the rain was over the central and southern southeast coast, more showery conditions back to the north, this low lifting northward. This area of clouds associated with it, with snow showers occurring mostly west of Yakutat into Prince William Sound. A few isolated snow showers generated and moved northeastward in the Cook Inlet area, crossing across Kenai, but very light snow amounts. And then a band of snow that brought the snow to south central Alaska yesterday, the Anchorage area and Turnagain Arm, drifting northward now to the central interior. And then up along the Arctic coast, most of that snowfall occurring offshore, but some of that did catch the central and southern areas and flow around this low from the west, southwest, carrying some pretty good snow showers into northeast Bristol Bay today, King Salmon, Dillingham, and some of those slipping on over across the mountains or through the Kamishak Gap into Kachemak Bay, and some of those may find their way into Cook Inlet here this evening. Otherwise, gusty winds, not quite as strong as yesterday, especially up here across St. Lawrence Island, and even the Pribilofs. Still pretty breezy here across the Aleutians with the cold air, again bringing the snowfall levels down to sea level, with snow showers heaviest on Alaska, the Alaska Peninsula area, and again lighter back out to the west, ridging here ahead of the next big storm system that's farther out to the west. For tonight, you can see that tight gradient field associated with it, and you just see the front up through here. So that'll begin to increase the winds late tonight there on the far western Aleutians. Otherwise, look for a general decrease in snow showers, continuing lightening of the winds here, especially for the central Aleutians and even the eastern Aleutians. Snow showers become more scattered in nature and less heavy. Same thing for the Pribilofs and along the southwest coast. We've got this low that is going to move in to Kodiak with some precipitation mostly on the southern portion of the island up into Shelikof Strait this evening. We'll move right up over the island later tonight after midnight with snow showers pretty widespread there from the northern part of the island, Shelikof Strait, and that'll begin to lift northward along the Alaska Range in the west here. Otherwise, just variably cloudy, Prince William Sound, Copper River Basin into northern Cook Inlet in the valleys. Up to the north, more clearing with dry conditions, higher pressure settling in there near Eagle. So light winds and clearing skies while temperatures fall below zero anywhere it sees the clearing. And this area of light snow and flurries lifts northward to the Brooks Range with on over toward Arctic Village, a break on the north slope, and that band of moisture still remains mostly off the coast, although central coast, even the east side there, could get a few skips of snow during the night tonight, but the west side here will be mostly dry with that easterly flow pattern, so look for some clearing as well there for the Noatak Valley, western north slope, on down to the Seward Peninsula area and into possibly the Yukon Delta. Dries out here over the southeast coast in response to the advance of the next warm front. Lots of moisture with this and a strong jet, and we'll see for tomorrow that rides right up the coastline off the coast. Look for possible storm force winds, possibly gales for sure there along the south coast. Rain, possibly heavy at times as this whole mass of moisture rides northward, warmer air associated with it. Back to the west, high pressure, mostly clear skies here over the entire eastern interior areas. This low slips on up. Look for a chance of snow showers, mostly Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, could get into the northern Cook Inlet area, possibly the Matanuska Valley, western Prince William Sound, and that's about the extent of it the way it looks at this point in time. Snow showers continue Kodiak Island, mostly Shelikof Strait side, back up into northeast Bristol Bay and Kamishak Bay. Snow areas of, or snow showers for the Kuskokwim Mountains, and some light snow. Scattered snow showers here for the southwest coast associated with this low continuing to weaken, but holding pretty stationary. And light winds with areas of light snow and fog for the St. Lawrence Island area through the Bering Strait, Seward Peninsula. Could see some clearing tomorrow, mostly dry conditions again back to the northwest there. Still a threat of some flurries there for the central Arctic coast. Out to the west, big storm rolling in. Again, gale and storm force winds ahead of that front. And we'll see for Tuesday, 944 millibar low tracks to just very close or just south of Chimay-Attu. And definitely a very tight pressure field with that, especially in advance of the front here. Bringing storm force winds, possibly hurricane force up through this area into the north central Bering, but definitely gales and storms rolling into the Alaska Peninsula. Good shot of rain on the upslope side of the mountains down here, and then really strong winds, mostly to the south initially there for the southwest Aleutians. This system brings snow up into south central Alaska again from Prince William Sound across the area. Again, lifting north or south to north with snow along the North Gulf Coast, mixing with rain in the afternoon, places like Cordova, but probably would stay as snow in Valdez. Some of that gets up into the Wrangell Mountains, possibly spilling into the Copper River Basin. Another system moving northeastward here brings another round of rain, and depending exactly where it tracks, although this system isn't all that strong, so I wouldn't look for it to be a big wind producer right now. Low temperatures for tonight, below zero, definitely Brooks Range. Any clear areas up over the interior will fall below zero. From the Tanana Valley on up to the North Slope, otherwise just slightly above for the Arctic coast. Teens to mid-20s here in the southwest and 30s to lower 40s for the Panhandle. Out to the west, Aleutians right around freezing or a little above tonight for the lows, mid-20s for the Pribilofs. Mid-20s, lower to mid-20s, northeast Bristol Bay, near 30 there for St. Lawrence Island. And checking out the high temperatures for tomorrow, a shade above zero here for the Brooks Range area and the North Slope to near 20 again along the central Arctic coast there. And back to the west, 30s to or lower 30s here over the Kuskokwim Delta, rise to the upper 30s there for Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula, into the 40s out over the Aleutians. And for the Panhandle, mid to upper 40s, warmest in the south, lower 40s North Gulf Coast to Kodiak Island, and mid 30s South Central Alaska, lower 20s in the Tanana Valley. Low temperatures for Tuesday morning, below zero again through the Brooks Range, and up there on the Arctic coast, 0 to 10 above for the lows, 20s here for Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula, 30s to lower 40s for the Panhandle. Highs the next day, not much change, a little above zero for the Brooks Range, 30s here in the southwest, near 50 over the central Aleutians, and the southeast coast, again in the 40s.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to aviation, flying weather, marginal VFR, Bristol Bay, across the Aleutian Range, southern Kodiak Island, here over the east central Bering Sea, across the Pribilofs, and then marginal VFR starting to move in, roll in out there towards Shimian 2. Pretty good in the interior here. A little bit of marginal VFR over toward Yakutat and along the border. Otherwise, central eastern Arctic coast, some marginal VFR just kind of skirting the coastline. And then for Monday afternoon, marginal VFR now a little more inland and along the coast and inland. There across the central areas up here, but most of the North Slope, Brooks Range, interior looking really good tomorrow. A little bit of marginal VFR now in Bristol Bay, but off the coast, and marginal VFR now all across the Panhandle, all the way up to Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay. And marginal VFR pushing eastward here with some IFR now showing up on the outer edge. And with that next front coming in, that next strong front, there'll be a band of IFR rolling into ADAC, marginal VFR bearing down on Nikolsky, VFR for the Pribilofs, north through St. Lawrence Island, the Bering Strait. Marginal VFR again hanging right along the coast, central and west side. And it looks like a couple of bands of marginal VFR rolling up from Kodiak here on up across Cook Inlet. And then for Tuesday afternoon, IFR now spreading into the southern Panhandle. Also got some IFR up there in the north, marginal VFR along and off the coast, up to the North Gulf Coast. Most of southern Alaska now becoming marginal VFR. Most of western Alaska, marginal VFR, with this area spreading into the northern Koyukuk Valley. North Slope, though, looking pretty good, VFR. Maybe some marginal VFR Barrow and Wainwright, on down across Kotzebue Sound, the Seward Peninsula. IFR now as that front pushes eastward to the Pribilofs, excuse me, pushing into the Alaska Peninsula, passes Anaktuvik, starting out marginal, becoming VFR, same forecast for Adigan. Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR at times tomorrow, but rainy should stay VFR. And for windy, looking VFR as well. Isabel wide open, same forecast for Isabel Mentasta. Clear skies, VFR flying for those passes. Tanita, same forecast VFR. And Portage, good VFR. Chilkoot and White, though, occasionally marginal in the morning, but later in the afternoon, definitely marginal VFR. Freezing levels here, 2,000 feet, just near or south of Juneau, on down to 4,000 feet there near Annette, Metlakatla. At the surface, up along the coast, down toward the Aleutian Range and back up across Nunivak Island. Pulling back to the north now with St. Lawrence Island there for the surface, but 2,000 feet still way down south of the chain. And as far as icing threats go, big area coming in above about 6,000 feet here into the western Aleutians. Could be some, actually even some areas of moderate. And then have a narrow band of icing here across Cook Inlet, the Kenai Peninsula into the Kuskokwim Valley, and a little bit possible up there in the central Arctic coast. More widespread icing across the southeast coast. And the jet stream, good southwest flow, very strong jet here, 190 knots, riding right up the whole ridge here, building northward. Very strong jet stream, a lot of moisture coming up with that. Otherwise, cold upper trough still anchored here just off the Yukon Delta coast with a trough southward from that. And high pressure trying to build into the Aleutians. For the 9,000 foot wind flow, that next storm, 50 to 60 knot winds coming in with that, 40 knots advancing to just west of Adak late in the day. Otherwise, this slow weakening, maybe 25 knot winds Bristol Bay. And then we've got this next system rolling up the southeast coast, 60 knot winds, 9,000 feet with that, so pretty strong. And then got a narrow band of southerlies here from about Kodiak Island northward, 25, could be as high as 40 knots across the southern Kenai Peninsula. And at 3,000 feet, kind of a low center in here somewhere, so it kind of breaks up that wind flow at this level. 5 to 10, maybe 25 knots up to the northeast, 50 knot winds with a low approaching the Panhandle. And out to the west, 75 knot winds here, 3,000 feet, pretty strong coming into the far western Aleutians. 55 across Amchitka, winds coming up for Adak and Atka. First Adak may reach 30 knots late tomorrow afternoon. Turbulence-wise, look for possible severe below 5,000 feet.
technology. It's the rhythm of our everyday life. We're more dependent on satellite and communication systems than at any other time in history. Disruptions can affect our economy and even our safety. To prepare for the effects of such events and minimize impacts, we need to look outside our atmosphere, some 93 million miles away, at a star we call the Sun. It's our main energy source. It warms the Earth and grows our food. While the Sun and the space between may seem pleasant from our perspective, it's anything but peaceful. At its surface exists a chaotic state of eruptions and radiation. And unlike Vegas, what happens at the Sun doesn't stay at the Sun.
Space weather is essentially emissions from the Sun, radiation, magnetic field that erupts from the solar surface, pumped out into space, sometimes right towards Earth. When it impacts the Earth, it impacts our technology. That's what we call space weather.
These solar events and their effects at Earth can disrupt systems we take for granted. From causing blackouts to the power grid, to delaying offshore drilling operations due to inaccurate GPS data. Interference with communication systems can force air traffic to reroute and impact rescue response and coordination. Outside our atmosphere, solar radiation can harm astronauts and the systems they depend on. The good news is that these eruptions can be detected early. Forecasters at the NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center in Boulder, Colorado, have their eyes on the Sun at all times.
The Space Weather Prediction Center is part of the National Weather Service and is very much like a normal weather forecast office. We're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're looking at data, we're looking at imagery, we're looking at model outputs. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches of imminent activity to our customers so they can take action.
In many ways, forecasting space weather is a lot like forecasting hurricanes. Those who rely on space weather forecasts, like electric power grid managers, are informed early on and can begin taking protective action.
When we see an eruption on the Sun, space weather forecasters will issue a watch. This is much like a hurricane watch. When a hurricane sits offshore of Miami, for example, perhaps 48 hours out, we too can see way in advance that something may be coming towards the Earth.
As the storm moves toward us, it hits a monitoring spacecraft orbiting 1 million miles away from Earth.
It's kind of our buoy sitting out there offshore, and that hurricane, about 30, 45 minutes before it makes landfall, we'll get the measurements from the buoy. That's what this spacecraft does for us. That big eruption that left the Sun hits the spacecraft. Now we've got the measurements of exactly what's going to impact us here on Earth, and we issue the warnings to give the power grid a heads up that the storm is now imminent. An interesting element to this whole process is that when the forecasters issue the alert, the power grid receives the alert, takes the necessary actions to protect the grid, and the average citizen never knows anything ever happened.
The number of customers who rely on space weather information continues to grow.
Welcome back. Along the eastern Arctic coast here, a noticeable increase in the ice air spreading out along the coast and even back up toward the central coast. A little bit of an increase from yesterday. Same thing going on, but to a lesser extent on the western coast. And main ice field up there continues to come southward and expect to do so for at least the next 4 or 5 days. Marine forecasts. Next storm coming up. Gale force winds coming on to the south coast tomorrow, spreading northward, northeast, coming up to 35 knots. Of course, higher gusts there through the channeled areas. Southeast 35, gusts 45 for Clarence Strait. North 25, again falling pressures. That'll pull those northerly winds down, but falling back to 15 knots for Northern Lane Canal. And then for Tuesday, much lighter winds now. The storm well off to the northeast and east, west-southwest 15. but seas still up there, 12 to 13 feet. South 20, increasing to 25, still on the north coast, seas around 12 feet. Pretty light winds now by comparison for Clarence Strait. Southerlies 15 for the northern and inside waters. Prince William Sound, northeast at 15, northeast at 10, east 15 here for the North Gulf Coast, picking up to about 20 on the west side. Small craft advisories, Barren Islands on up into Kachemak Bay, winds increasing to 30 knots in the latter part of the afternoon. Seas 9 to 10 feet, northeast 20 for the area south of the Forelands, northeast 15, northern Cook Inlet. And then for Tuesday, still northeast, no change up here north of the Forelands, but the southern inlet on into Kachemak Bay, southwest at 20, west 20 for the Barren Islands, southwest 20, western North Gulf Coast, and southerlies, small craft advisories there for the eastern North Gulf Coast, back down to 15 from the east for Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island, small craft advisory, south winds 25 knots, seas 5 feet Chillicothe Strait to 10 feet there on the Pacific side. Westerlies 15 knots across the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay. And the outlook the next day, we've got southwesterlies now for Chillicothe Strait at 25 knots, west 20 knots with 11-foot seas on the east side of Kodiak, west 25 here from Sitkinak to Castle Cape or Chignik, but big increase in the winds, storms in the forecast now. South 50 knots right across the peninsula, increasing to 25 knots there in Bristol Bay, seas building to 16 feet on the Pacific side. And out in the Aleutians for tomorrow, with that strong frontal system coming in, southeast 55 knots, gusts to 70 knots, which would put wind gusts at about 80 miles per hour or so, and increasing here to the west, but mostly Adak and Atka, 20 knots for tomorrow until tomorrow evening, and then northwest diminishing to 15 knots across Unalaska Island. And then the forecast for the next day, lots of storms here, just about all of the Aleutians under a storm warning. Southwest 55 knots turns southerly, 50 to 55 knots here across the eastern Aleutians. Out to the west, 45 to 50 knot winds in store for the western Aleutian areas. Seas building to 33 feet here for the area south of the Adak and Atka zone. For the St. Lawrence Island, northeast 15, northerlies north of Nunivak Island, pretty light 10 knots, turning west 15 into Kuskokwim Bay. And then we got north to northwest here across the Bering Sea into the Pribilofs, northeast 15, St. Lawrence Island. Easterlies 25 for St. Lawrence Island. Gales now developing along the southwest coast for Tuesday. Storms for the Pribilofs, storms for St. Matthew Island. And up along the Arctic coast, west-southwest at 10 on the east side, central coast, east 15. Otherwise, 10-knot winds there for the western coast all the way to the Bering Strait. And for Tuesday, easterlies 15 from Wells to Cape Thompson, and then Cape Thompson really all the way to the central coast, south becoming southwest at 10. Light winds all the way to Demarcation Point. For tonight again, next storm here beginning to roll up to the Panhandle. This system here, snow advisory out for the northeast Bristol Bay area, 4 to 7 inches of snow for tomorrow as that moves through for areas east of King Salmon. Chance of snow, Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula. Big storm out west drives eastward here with looks like 70 mile per hour winds Monday night for the central Aleutians. That advances the Alaska Peninsula, and snow pretty likely here for south central Alaska. More rain.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.